Alright, hey everybody, welcome to Talk Recovery's Facebook Live channel, and we come to you Thursdays from our wonderful studio. Say hi everybody.
Hi.
So we're going to be going live in a couple minutes. Share us, like us, let everybody know. Show starts at noon. We just finished with Ryan Hampton from the US. He's the man who is changing the way we look at addiction. Used to work in the White House. Not bad. So let's go.
You can hear yourself.
Mic's on.
Pete Townsend, let my love open the door. I hope that's what we're doing here at Talk Recovery on Vancouver's Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We do have to mention that we attempted contact with the liberal candidate as well. We did not get response. And I have to make a correction. Selina Robinson was the MLA, as we're talking about identity and all that it holds. She is the BC NDP candidate for Coquitlam-Millardville. And we're very happy to have her here in studio today. And I'm just going to pass over the mic and let Frances open our interview.
Thank you. Hello, Selina.
Hello.
Welcome to Talk Recovery.
My pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so we want to get right to it because I have tons of questions. I'm pretty involved in this election and I've been watching pretty closely. Did you watch the debate last night?
I did watch the debate last night.
Of course you did. Of course you did. Okay, so can you tell me what is the two-tiered healthcare system in BC when it comes to mental health and addiction services?
Well, right now, if you have lots of money, you can buy whatever services you want. You can purchase counseling services. You can purchase addiction treatment services. You can really buy whatever services you think you need. And if you're on social assistance, you do have access to some public part of the system. But if you're, a regular person with a regular income trying to pay the mortgage and pay orthodontic bills and do all the things that most British Columbians do, you can't access services. You can't find publicly funded services that will help you as you struggle to make changes in your life, to make better choices in your life. And if you have a child who has an addiction, you can't find any services. And I know two people in Coquitlam-Millardville alone who have remortgaged their homes in order to purchase services for their kids in the States, and they sent them to the States for recovery.
Right, and I recently heard the story of Nick Lang, if you're familiar with that name.
I am.
Yes, and his mother, he was 15 years old, his mother released his custody over to the
province.
Yeah, and I'm not sure of all the details. What I see as a mom, I have a 15-year-old boy as well. What I see is a woman that is advocating for her son, and her son's passed and died in care and wasn't given the treatment that he needed. But it sounds to me as though she signed him over, released him over to the ministry in order to get him help because she wasn't able to get that help for him. What does the NDP government want to do about situations like that?
Well, John Horgan and the BC NDP are really committed to making things different for British Columbians, making life better for British Columbians. And so one of the things that we're proposing to do, should we form government, is to actually have a ministry of mental health and addictions. No one's ever proposed that before. It's we have an opioid crisis on our hands. We have a long history, I think, of not actually creating a proper system of care. We have lots of people who fall through the cracks. Wait lists are tremendously long, and when people are ready for care, when people are ready to say, I'm ready to do my life differently, we can't wait, we can't hold off. We need to be able to respond, and that's something that John Horgan and the BC NDP are committed to doing.
Right, and can you tell me a little bit about how does Ontario address mental health and addictions for youth compared to BC?
Well, I'm not actually that familiar with the Ontario model, but I know that here in British Columbia right now, and I can tell a story because I do think storytelling is the most productive way to describe sort of what's going on or what's not going on. I had a young man show up at my MLA office last August, and he was high. He had just used heroin, and he came to my office because his mom had called me 2 weeks earlier in absolute panic mode. She had she's a single mom, a teacher, and she paid out of pocket whatever money she could scrounge, and her son did not follow the rules and so would get kicked out, but of course money wouldn't get reimbursed. And so she was out thousands of dollars and her son's still not in treatment. And I said, well, see if he'll come and talk to me. And he showed up, God bless him, he showed up at my office, and I thought, I am not letting this kid out of my sight until we can get him into a system. And there was nothing. I made phone calls, I called different organizations, I called Fraser Health, I made phone calls, and it was only when I called people that I happen to know who work in the system and that we were able to get him the supports that night. But again, there were gaps, so he would go into detox, and then a week later I was getting these panic text messages from him. Selina, there's a 6-week wait for me to get into treatment. And it's like, oh, he can't wait 6 weeks, right? He's on Suboxone, he's stable, but he's terrified, and he wants this to be over. He wants to be moving into recovery. So again, it was about making phone calls and getting the system to work, but it shouldn't be that hard, and it shouldn't be because you know someone who can make a few phone calls.
Right, exactly. It shouldn't be like getting past the line.
Right, exactly.
So in April of this year, the Liberal government claimed that between 2013 and 2017, that they opened 500 new treatment beds. What are your thoughts on those numbers?
Well, it's very interesting because they, in 2013, that was part of their election promise, was to open up 500 new treatment beds. There's been a real challenge, and the CBC, Nancy Clancy, has done an amazing job of trying to actually count all the beds. It's really hard to sort of keep track because some of them are hospital beds, some of them are detox beds, some of them are treatment beds, so they're all over the place. What's important to acknowledge is that this wasn't new money. None of this was new money. This was a direction to the health authorities that said you need to find X number of new beds, you need to create spaces, but there's no new money attached to it. So it meant that it took from other parts of the healthcare system in order to create these beds. Now we also know that it's not just beds that we need, right? We need a system. We need a system of care that when you pick up the phone and you say, I have a drug problem, I'm ready to change this, I'm ready to do the work, I'm ready to do whatever it is that I need to do, that help needs to be there immediately, and it needs to be seamless. You can't go to detox and then come out of detox and be told there's a 6-week wait for a bed. It doesn't work that way. We don't do that when people are, break their leg. We don't say, oh, well, we'll put you in traction, but it's a 6-week wait for your surgery. We don't do that. And so this is another example of where we have a private system of care and we need to incorporate it into our public system.
Right, and if you have money, you have quicker access to treatment. But even with money, there's still a barrier to having treatment available. I wonder what John Horgan and the NDP government is wanting to do to change mental health and addiction services and how they're made available to British Columbia. So does he have any precise steps that he'd like to take?
Well, part of it is really about understanding currently what exists, and there's no real comprehensive review of what status we're at now. So it would be remiss of any government to say, well, we're going to do this, 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 and this, unless we first take a look at, well, what do we currently have? We also need to develop some expertise around the issue. We have Riverview as certainly an opportunity before us. Riverview is in Coquitlam-Millardville, and it had been historically the mental health institution for the province. It's been gradually shut down over the last 25-30 years because we don't do institutional care. But there's 244 acres of amazing lands and a beautiful arboretum, a tree, just a sampling of trees from around the world that are just unbelievable, in a real pastoral setting. And there's a real opportunity for us to have that as a center for mental health and wellness, and to develop the expertise that we once had. We once actually had the expertise to look at these issues and to make sure that we had evidence-based treatments, that we didn't have the revolving door that we currently have, which actually adds to the wait list. So if we worked with people for the long term. We were in there with them for the long haul. We also need to make sure that we're studying all the successes in other places, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, that there's lots of good work happening internationally, and we have to be experts at pulling that together and making sure that it works for us.
I'm glad that you just said that we need to take a look at the international system of care. We're behind a conference that's taking place called the Recovery Capital Conference of Canada, which is going to be taking place in September. And we're bringing Portugal, a delegation from Portugal, and they're going to discuss the decriminalization and so forth. So within the ministry, the potential new Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction, what's your views about decriminalization, number one? And when we talk about Riverview, one thing that never gets talked about is Portugal has over 40 therapeutic communities completely funded by the government. And what that means is they have way more treatment beds than we do, and they have, only 10 million residents that live in Portugal. So, could Riverview potentially become a state-of-the-art therapeutic community to go along with the decriminalization? So there's two questions in there, and then I have one more question for you. So what are your thoughts about decriminalization?
So I think that we have to be able to have those kinds of conversations. I think that's and we're starting them. We certainly have the Crosstown Clinic that's using prescription heroin to treat people who have addictions that can't seem to make different choices. It just isn't working for them. And what we've seen by providing them with prescription heroin is that they're healthier. Mm-hmm. Guess what? They're healthier. They're some of them even have jobs. And they have housing, and so they're stabilizing, and they're healthy. And so that's part of the conversation, and the more we see that, the more we can sort of talk about what the opportunities are and what the trade-offs are. So that's a conversation I think is always very helpful to have in terms of, we know that the war on drugs hasn't been working, and so we need to find a different way to address this. And in terms of the Riverview Therapeutic Community model, it's a perfect setting. It's 244 acres. There's lots of room for lots of different things. Currently, right now, Christy Clark and the BC Liberals are looking at putting market housing and an economic zone, whatever that means, on the site. And I want to protect it and make sure that we have these lands to do innovative, creative things that can really make a difference in people's lives.
Well, I am for decriminalization, but I am scared, very scared, if we don't really take a look at treatment and what treatment options are going to look like, because treatment on demand in BC is methadone, Suboxone, and prescription heroin, and a lot of advocates forget the idea about treatment. What about treatment? Long-term treatment. Some of the treatment beds in Portugal are 2 years, and some people get mandated to treatment if they do not. If they continue to do criminal activity. So we'll talk about something else now. This is Talk Recovery Radio. So a little hint, if this actually happens and we do get a Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction, can we consider the term Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction and Recovery? Because there's so much focus on addiction and there's so much focus on the problem. I think if we have this philosophical movement of let's talk about recovery, like recovery works, heroin addicts can get clean, and heroin addicts don't need to be on BC housing and welfare forever. They can get off welfare. I have tons of friends that are heroin addicts that drive pretty nice cars and aren't on welfare. Like, the inspiration's higher. So what do you think about that and adding recovery to the title of the Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction?
We're not married to the name. There's
Perfect.
certainly up for discussion.
Yes, good. So I'm really hoping that happens, because when we add the word recovery to the conversation, we start talking about the solution. Because you can talk about addiction to forever, and it's still addiction, and it is what it is, and why people use, we will never figure it out.
And language matters.
And language matters. And language matters. I mean, we can try to figure out what's happening with this overdose crisis, and a lot of and also another note too is someone I know that passed away, all the prescription heroin in the world wouldn't have saved his life. He works in a safety sensitive position. He isn't allowed to use legal or illegal heroin, but he still likes heroin, and he used and he passed away on the job site. So we really need to take a look at that conversation. So I'm hoping if this moves forward that those conversations are there, because the two-tiered system isn't just the financial one, it's also a service one.
Right. And I just want to, in closing, ask you what makes you the right fit to be the Minister of Mental Health, Addictions and Recovery?
Ooh.
Well, that's very interesting. Well, I have been the opposition spokesperson for mental health and addictions since January. John Horgan asked me to take on that file when Sue Hamill, who did have it previously, decided to retire. And I was very excited and honored to be asked because this is my background. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology, registered clinical counselor, and I started my career as a 20-something-year-old on Robson Clinic, working with people downtown. AIDS, HIV was the crisis at the time. Years later, and hoping again to be the MLA for Coquitlam-Millardville, hoping to form government with John Horgan and the BC NDP, and hopefully we'll have a ministry. And you know, I know that when John is premier, he'll be making his own choices, but I think my background makes me a good fit for certainly contributing to this ministry and making sure that we provide services for British Columbians, making life better for them.
Thank you. Actually, I do have one more question. I lied. So you know that 10 million that they have in reserve?
Federal dollars.
Okay, federal dollars in reserve. What are the plans for that? Like, it just seems really odd that we have we have $10 million sitting in the bank and the house is burning down.
Well, that's Christy Clark and the BC Liberals. They got $10 million and we can't figure out what they've done with it. So I think your analogy, if it's sitting in the bank and the house is on fire, is a good one.
Okay. Thank you for being with us today. Giuseppe, you got anything else?
No, I think, you know, as long as we change the title, I think we're good. Thank you very much for being on our show today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the work that you do. It makes a difference.
Yeah, we're all just part of the puzzle, and we try our best.
Yeah, we're the sky.
We're the sky. What does that mean, we're the sky?
No, hard to put together.
Okay.
And we'll keep trying to get a response from the other parties if you know, Talk Recovery, Vancouver Co-op Radio are not in support of any one party. This is just a platform in which we can kind of find out some insights from the parties, and so
yeah, I think there's one more show before the election. I think so yeah, we'll see what.
So
we
yeah,
can
if
do.
there's a candidate that would like to come on and speak, by all means, we welcome you.
Exactly, yes. So we are going to finish off our show, and we're actually a couple minutes early. Wow. It's only 12:50.
Well, go on a rant.
Go on a rant? I don't want to go on a rant.
I mean, I drive past Riverview every single day. I mean, it's so beautiful. And I know that there has to be some sort of pull from the film industry and how much that brings in. I don't know. There's always filming going on there. But you just think, they're just always filming this one little part of the building. I mean, there's so much ground and so many rooms and so much space that it's just, to see it go to anything else, knowing what it was built for, teaching, holding of clients, I mean, patients, I mean, it could be something great. It would be really nice to see some decisions on holding that place for treatment and for like a recovery community and fill in that space.
We just got a comment from Dr. Ray Baker. He's been an addiction specialist for a few decades here, and he would like to see the name called Ministry of Recovery from Addiction and Mental Health. That's a beautiful title. I love that title. Recovery from. Yes, so...
I just wanted to say on the Riverview, on the note for the Riverview, there's actually a rally for Riverview on April 30th. It's from 1:30 to 3:30, and yeah, I'll be there.
You'll be there. So if you are at home thinking about voting, consider every vote does matter, and especially in times now with whatever party it is that you agree with, there's lots of decisions that need to be made, and all the way from addiction and mental health. Obviously, our show is about addiction issues, so we're focusing on that, but there's a plethora of issues. So I vote and definitely get into the spirit of voting, and your voice matters, and if we all vote, we'll have our Canada the way we want it to be. So Darren, what's our last song? I just called you Canada.
Well, and if you don't get what you want, I mean, just live with the fact that you just can't get no satisfaction. That's our next song. This is a cover band, Junior Wells.
Nice. Well, we got a problem again. There we go. That was good. We're done? Good. Oh.